Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Milwaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
You're listening to Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR station. Here's one of our favorite conversations about what's happening in the city.
If you're buying protein-rich foods or supplements, there's a good chance that protein came from a Wisconsin cheesemaker. Whey is a liquid byproduct of the cheesemaking process and is rich in protein. It is usually processed into the form of powder to be added to smoothies, bars, or other food advertising high-protein content. Wisconsin farmers produce about 1/3 of the nation's whey, and demand has skyrocketed in recent years as people seek more protein in their diet. Drew Dawson is a freelance writer for Milwaukee Magazine who wrote about Wisconsin's whey economy for this month's issue. He joins Lake Effect Sam Woods to discuss why whey is in demand and why some farmers benefit more than others.
I want to start with some basics. So what is whey and what is it used for?
Basically, whey is a byproduct of the cheesemaking process, but it is a big byproduct. And by that I mean, for every 1 pound of cheese you make, you get 9 pounds of whey. So say you have 100 pounds of milk, 10 pounds of that is going to be cheese, 90 pounds of that is going to be whey. And traditionally, that was something that they just threw away. So say in the 80s, 90s, and before that, there was no use for it. Nothing was discovered for it. They just gave it away. There was no disposal of it. It was used as pig feed. But then later, it was found that they had some pretty nutritional value.
In your article, you mentioned that whey was originally popular with bodybuilders and now has a more general audience. So can you describe how this changed?
Yeah, no, it's just something I think that, I did not grow up with, a balanced diet, if you will, but, learn later like, oh, I need to have these things. And protein is one that has become big in recent years for just the everyday consumer. Whereas 10 years ago, yeah, you saw protein powders, you saw things like that at, GNC and, bodybuilders and, athletes, and all of them were using it to build muscle. But then everyone realized kind of, oh, maybe I actually need some protein. I like to wake up now with some protein and be very intentional about it. And you just see it a lot more. So if you see like, hey, 16 grams of protein in this, 20 grams of protein in that, whether it's protein bar or something else, a lot of times that is coming from powdered whey that is created through this process.
And in just the last few years, whey has found another market through the popularization of GLP-1 drugs. Can you explain what GLP-1s are and how they fit into this picture?
So if you've been following the news, yeah, GLP-1s might have been something you come across. That is weight loss drugs that you might have seen more common now, and which are great things. But as part of that, you not only are you losing body fat, you're also losing muscle mass. So a lot of doctors right now are seeing that and saying, oh, you need to add more protein to your diet. One of the easiest ways to do that is whey protein. And that is not the only reason we're seeing more of it now, but it is one of the big players.
Turning to the supply side of this, given that all these different types of people are interested in supplementing their diet with whey, how important is it to a cheesemaker's bottom line these days?
Yeah. So again, kind of jumping back, like that was a byproduct. It was something thrown away by most cheesemakers, if not all cheesemakers. Now, 95% is estimated by the Center for Dairy Research of cheesemakers turn whey into a profit. So no longer is it really considered a profit. It is a huge revenue driver, and that's because you can turn it into this protein. It was discovered that, it had these amino acids, which are, the building blocks for proteins. I won't get into all the science. I am not the science expert. But basically, it became one of the most nutritious sources of protein on the market. And so the value just skyrocketed once that was discovered. And new ways are being found constantly for how to use it. But it's also been concentrated now to, sweet whey was traditionally what you made from the cheesemaking process. It's what, and very simply, in the smallest way, without doing too much, you could turn it into sweet whey, which is about 12% protein. Now companies are able to do it with new technology, 80 to 90%, and there is a lot of value in that. And one example I had in the story was, a cheese producer, Cedar Grove. Their separator went down in the fall for, I think, 3 weeks. And in that 3-week period, just based on Whey, their overall bottom line lost 10 to 15% of total revenue lost that they were usually are expected to see. So it's definitely very lucrative and something if they can find that benefit, same way that when they first discovered that Whey had these nutritional protein benefits, I assume they'll find a way to try to find that benefit and even more so in the future.
Do we know who the first person was to knock on a cheesemaker's door and say, hey, that waste product that you're either throwing away or feeding to pigs, I want that? Do we know when this all started?
Not totally, but around the 90s is when, they really discovered that there was value in this and that it had the nutritional properties that it did. And a lot of that was from the Center for Dairy Research and other national cheesemaking and dairy-related organizations that we're trying to help the dairy farmers as, milk prices were staying the same. They wanted to find value elsewhere, and that's where they found it. And so a lot of people can tell you, I imagine there's a lot of people claiming to be the first ones. One might even be one I interviewed for this, Bob Mills from Cedar Grove. He had said when he first bought his cheesemaking facility in, I think, 1989, he was immediately like, we should invest in this and find ways to both chill and process some of our Whey on site. He is a smaller cheesemaker, so it doesn't have the big capital machinery that others might have. But his investment then said it was just instrumental, not just for being a revenue driver, but also just for the survival of the cheesemaking process. Because though dairy prices fluctuate, they're high right now. Cheesemaking is just about the same. So the price of cheese has not changed as much from the 90s, which is unfortunate for, say, the smaller and medium-sized cheesemakers.
I want to zero in on that relationship between Whey and the price of milk. So your article mentions that overall, this rise in demand for a former waste product, Whey, benefits Wisconsin farmers. And Wisconsin, as America's dairy land, leads the nation in Whey production, accounting for about 30% of the national output. But the price of Whey also has an effect on the price of milk. So can you explain that relationship?
Sure. So, we are very, very big producers of Whey in the state. Obviously, we do a lot of dairy, so we naturally, if we're making cheese as well, producing a lot of Whey. And so when every month the USDA, the federal organization that oversees this, sets the minimum price of milk. So that is the minimum price you have to pay. So a cheesemaker, for example, has to pay to get that milk. But it's paying not just for the milk overall, it's paying for all of its properties. So that is fat, protein, whey solids, lactose, minerals, all of those things it accounts for. And so when whey prices are high, like they are right now, that is factored into the cost of the milk. So a cheesemaker has to pay for all those. So they are paying a high price right now for that milk.
Yeah, it's almost like you're paying for the potential of milk, or like what milk can be than the kind of the milk itself.
Absolutely, yeah. And so when you see that happening, so say a big cheesemaker, someone that can do millions of pounds of cheese a year, they are paying for that milk, but they are getting all the benefits of that whey. So like they're getting the whey and producing it. But they are processing it on site with all the machinery that they can afford, and they can have enough to use those machines. So they can make 80%, 90% protein whey and turn a profit. They get all the profit and all the benefits from that, and that is not necessarily that is more than probably what they're paying for that milk. Whereas the smaller, medium-sized cheesemaker doesn't have the machine, has to ship it out. So there are shipping costs that they have to do to an off-site place, and it's a pretty heavy product.
You mentioned processing machinery and alluded to the fact that it can be quite expensive, or shipping it out to someone who has that machinery can be quite expensive. But for the cheesemaker, what does it take to maximize your return on whey, so to speak?
So say Cedar Grove, as I brought up earlier, they have a chiller on site and a separator on site. And what that essentially does is that beginning process, so it's taking kind of that water off of it. A lot of whey is a lot of parts water when it first comes out as a liquid whey. So separating that can take a lot of cost, so you're not just shipping water down the road and not getting the value for all the whey back. But then, from there you send it through very specific membranes and, so very tiny little things that can separate all the minerals, the lactose, things like that. So it just becomes that whey product and then turning into a powder as well. And from there, it's shipped out as is to whoever is purchasing from there.
So are all cheesemakers able to cash in on this rise in demand for whey equally?
No. That's the unfortunate part of this. Whereas, this is a great thing for dairy farmers, and we cannot forget that. It is not equal across the board. So again, when a big cheesemaker is producing everything on site and can, use all its machinery to turn it into 89% whey, and that's kind of the final product that it's able to sell itself, it's getting all the value for that. The smaller ones can't do that, unfortunately. They can do as much as they can, but they then have to ship it out, and the issue there becomes is they're paying that high price for that milk initially, so which, as we said, includes the cost of the whey. So when whey prices are high like they are now, they are paying that full price, but they are not getting that full value back because they don't turn it into a final product. They have to pay more. But that can be a double-edged sword because there are only two options, essentially. They can either turn it for a value of some profit where they are essentially losing some money. They are losing money in that process. Or they can dispose of it, which is even more expensive to dispose of. So, they're caught in a tough spot because they're losing money either way. And this just happens to be the way they lose less.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. So let's recap our road to this moment. So whey protein, often in the form of powder, has seen increasing demand over the last couple of decades as it finds new segments of the population that are interested in it, whether that be fitness enthusiasts, general population looking for more protein, people taking GLP-1s, etc. Wisconsin and Wisconsin's cheesemakers are theoretically well positioned to take advantage of that rise in demand because whey is a byproduct of the cheesemaking process. Used to be just to throw it away. Now they can profit from it. However, bigger farms are able to afford the type of machinery and realize more of the gains from whey. So, all of that being said, crash course history there of the last few decades. What does the future hold, particularly for small farmers who are paying that higher price in milk, but are not able to, on their own, realize the type of gains that bigger farmers are able to realize for their product?
Yeah. So that's the crystal ball I bet a lot of people would like to see. And there are many takes on what the future holds, but right now they believe that this is not just a short-term trend. Protein is something we all need, and it's definitely, I think, you're going to see continued demand for it. But for the smaller farmers, some things that I heard in reporting this were they still wanted to benefit the dairy farmers. No one's working against each other. But yeah, just an equal, hey, we're hurting a little bit from this. Is there any way to make there an equal formula for everyone that benefits everyone? And that's one way. And then another one is that the Center for Dairy Research mentioned is something that is done in Europe is a couple of smaller cheesemakers, combine their resources and, have a drying facility, if you will, somewhere regionally, and they all contribute to that and feed it, because it is not an easy process to run those machines. It's very capital intensive, and what that means is it needs 1 to 2 million pounds of liquid whey per day to make it financially viable. So that's not something, the small cheesemaker can do when they're producing 3.5 million pounds of cheese per year, which produces 40 million pounds of whey per year. So there is a lot of possibilities and a lot of options, but yeah, it's uncertain where the future is, but it's no matter where the benefit is, even if it's losing a little bit right now, they still see huge value in whey versus 3 decades ago when it was just pig feed. It's now one of the most valuable products in cheese making.
Well, Drew, thank you so much for joining me on Lake Effect.
Yeah, Sam, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Drew Dawson is a freelance writer for Milwaukee Magazine, and he joined Lake Effect's Sam Woods.
That was the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast. It comes from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR station. Lake Effect is WUWM's talk show all about what's happening in the city. If you want to hear more conversations like this, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast, and you'll hear highlights from the show. If you want to hear the full show, it's on the radio at noon, Monday through Friday, on 89.7